I will finish the conversation on your outlook for the capital markets, stocks in particular, but I do want to point out just something you said about the central bank psyching people out. Well, looking overseas, Lawrence, to the Bank of England, they actually have done something that is quite unprecedented. They openly admitted that the economy is headed towards a recession, if not already in a recession. This is not something we typically see central banks do. Speaking of psyching people out, why do you think they did this?
Well, that kind of statement might be, we're in a recession, guys, so don't raise your prices
Okay.
because you're not going to have customers anyway. You don't want to deter your customers even more, whatever customers you have left, because you said your price is too high. That may be a coordinating statement. Let's coordinate on bad times, so because we're setting prices. But it's also very dangerous because it could tell people to start firing. And I think it would be much better if the head of the Bank of England said, let's talk Turkey about what's really going on here. What we macroeconomists know that many outcomes are possible. That's what we know from the facts, that we call this multiple equilibrium, multiple places the economy can, multiple outcomes that the economy can experience. And it's with respect to price increases and house prices and asset prices and employment. So and output. So let's talk about getting on the same page.
Speaking of,
I don't want to make statements about that are going to scare people into
sure.
getting on the wrong page. So
All right.
price is low, don't fire anybody, and we'll get out of this. That's what the Bank of England should be saying. Stop increasing prices so much because everybody else is going to stop doing it. And by the way, don't lay off anybody, because if you do, other people will lay off. You'll lose your customers.
I think this might be some reverse psychology going on. If you tell people not to do something, they're probably going to do it.
They may do it, but they may also not. And
Yeah.
Think about it again. Go back to John Kennedy's first couple of weeks in office.
True.
Steel companies were raising prices by 2 or 3%. Okay, inflation had been very low. He thought we're going to stimulate everybody else doing the same thing, copycat behavior. So he got all the steel executives together and yelled at them, or he did that. I'm not sure why they actually got them in a room, but he did yell at them publicly on TV. He called them, in effect, traitors to the country. And they what did they do? That was called jawboning. He was using his jawbone to affect the economy. He got the steel companies to back down and reduce their price increases. We need some jawboning.
Speaking of the Bank of England, I just want to bring your attention to this, and then we'll finish off here. The U.S. dollar has been strengthening vis-a-vis other currencies. Here at home, we talk about the depreciation of the dollar versus real goods because of inflation. But if you look overseas, for example, the pound has crashed to a 37-year low. The euro reached parity, which it hasn't done in the last 20 years. Why the strength in the U.S. dollar, Lawrence?
So I think this has to do with risk. The world is getting, as Ukraine is gradually taking back its territory, Putin is threatening nuclear war. Now, we don't know exactly how crazy he is, but he's definitely a crazy person, irrational. And so you want to go to a flight to safety. The U.S. is viewed as the safest place to invest, particularly U.S. Treasury bonds. So even with inflation being high and getting let's say a negative return on those investments after inflation, it's still safer to get into dollars to buy these securities if people were kind of panicking. And I think that's part of what's going on here, the movement away. So I think this is probably a good time to buy pounds and a good time to buy euros, and probably also Canadian dollars.
Interesting.
Because
all right.
if we have nuclear war, Canada might be the last country standing.
Okay, well, you just open a new can of worms there. Can you elaborate on that? It would be irresponsible for me to not follow up on that statement. Can you elaborate?
Well, I have this Substack. I'm putting out a column today about how we should respond to Putin's nuclear threats, which is to put him on the top of our target list. Say, if there's a nuclear, if he launches a nuclear attack or appears to be doing so, we should target him personally, because that will be our best deterrence to keep him from doing anything like that. But absent that, there's lots of different types of nuclear wars that could occur here. It could even involve our threatening to attack China so that they put pressure in the context of a nuclear war, so that they know that they have to stop Russia right now. I mean, Russia doesn't have as many targets as we do for nuclear weapons. China does. I mean, China, if you add China and other buddies of Russia, and we start getting to have an equally target-rich environment on both sides. So we have to think a lot more strategically. And the statements that our government is now starting to make says we're going to have if Putin launches, it's going to be a catastrophic implications for Russia. That sounds like full-fledged nuclear war. We will take out Moscow and St. Petersburg. And what we really need to say is not that threat, because we're not really at war with Russia. We're at war with Putin. What we really need to say is if Putin does anything, we take him out immediately. And we also take out all his buddies.
What do you mean take him out? With force?
Yes, we target him. A nuclear bomb goes to his bunker. Okay. The same minute we see them starting to.
But that's the equivalent of a nuclear bomb hitting, the White House. Isn't that a declaration of war?
Well, if he's not suicidal, and he
Right.
appears to be very, very much in love with himself and concerned with his health and safety, he's not visiting Ukraine, is he, to visit the troops? Right? We have people going to Kiev in the middle of the war, or secretary, top executive, top officials. He can't even make it over, over the border there to his motherland that he's grabbed. So I think we need to threaten him personally, because that's likely to be our best deterrence. If he thinks if he thinks he is issuing this order is going to lead to his immediate death, he may not issue it.
One could argue that because of the prospect of mutually assured destruction, which is a core tenet of the Cold War, we don't have to worry about anything. Nothing will ever escalate beyond reproach. What do you think?
Well, he's talking about limited nuclear war, and I think Biden at the beginning thought, well, that would mean that a city like Kharkiv in Ukraine, which has about 1.4 million, would be traded off against a Russian city with about one, of the same size, and that would be what he's talking about. But Putin must have signaled in his language that he's now talking about hitting Berlin or hitting San Francisco. And that's why we ratcheted up our language. That was probably a private conversation signal from the Russians to us that if he does attack Ukraine and we respond by attacking a same size city, he will respond by attacking a US city, a big one. And so we're responding publicly now. And when you make a public statement, it's much more credible than a private statement. Because it may be that you're also telling your commanders in this nuclear submarines that to follow this public statement. So now we're in a situation where we've announced that if he does something small, we're going to do something major. And of course, he would respond potentially. So we have to be very careful. That's why people should go to larrykotlikoff.substack.com and to read this article I'm going to post right after the show. Mm-hmm. And because I think it's going to help people think through how we should be responding and why I think we're making the wrong public statements. And we need to direct our threats directly at Putin and all his and the people that would launch the nuclear weapons in Russia. We tell them, look, your life, you launch, we know if a missile leaves this particular location, we will kill that. We will destroy that location in 10 seconds. Okay, you will be dead. So if you launch, you're committing suicide. We need to get that message to the people who have their fingers on those triggers. And we don't. But if we tell them, if you launch, we're going to kill your family in Moscow, they'll launch
Mhm.
because they'll launch as revenge, uh, because they want to, you know. So think about that. Think about what that commander in the bunker or in the submarine, the Russian submarine, is thinking when it comes to following some order from Putin. Because he
I think
knows there's another submarine right around the corner that's a US sub that's tracking him, or may have reason to believe there is a sub. So we need to be sending Putin letters, literally letters. If we know his location, we need to send thousands of letters to everybody who lives around the neighborhood addressed to Vladimir Putin, care of, Andre, whatever. And that will be a message that we know where you are. And completely costless message, just put it all in the mail. And all these messages come. And by the way, he will quickly learn that we know where he is.
do you
That's what we've got to think a little more out of the box than these guys in the Biden administration uh, appear to be doing. But they may be thinking a lot more deeply about this than I am. I don't
just
want to accuse them of. I don't want to accuse myself of being smarter than they are, because I don't think. I may not be.
Oh, you're a pretty smart guy, Laurence. I don't know. I don't know if you're not smarter than they are. I think some would argue the contrary. But Laurence, just on a recent event, the Nord Stream 1 pipeline started leaking. Accusations have been made against the Kremlin. The Kremlin has denied such accusations that Russia was involved and attacked the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, calling these accusations stupid. What do you think happened?
It sounds like somebody might have. I don't know how actually you can get down, and I don't know how deep below the water surface, and whether the Ukrainians might have an underwater sub that could go down deep enough to blow up something. But if I'm Ukraine, I would do that. And
If
but
you're
the other thing,
Ukraine, what motivation does Ukraine have to do something like this?
this cuts off the Russian gas supply to Western Europe uh, without putting Ukraine's finger exactly on that trigger, and that means that Russia doesn't get uh, the hard currency to buy war supplies, and to um,
I
and
see.
that's why. Maybe just bring back up China here. I was just looking today at how much China has increased their importation of Russian fossil fuels. They're now, I believe, the largest importer of Russian fossil fuels, uh, and they're spending about $70 billion a year on Russian oil and gas. So this is where I think, and that's basically doubled or so from a year ago. We have to let the Chinese know that this is not okay, and
Mhm.
we need to let them know that if there is a nuclear war, a major nuclear war with Russia, they stand to lose Beijing.
I'm going to end on this question then. What do you think is going to happen between Sino-American relations? Worse, better, the same, nothing? How likely are we headed? How likely is it that we are headed towards a hot war with China?
Well, this is all fraught with great danger. I think Xi is a lot, smarter and more stable, mentally stable than Putin. Taking over Taiwan, that eventually China is going to be the biggest economy in the world, probably twice as large as the U.S. economy. If you look at the end of the century, I'm going to be putting out a co-authored paper called "The Future of Economic Power" at the Kotlikoff.net. People can find it in a few days. It'll be out. The projections show that China is eventually going to be so strong that and have such a bigger military. Why take over Taiwan now and get into a fighting war that might end up with losing, everything with the U.S. And Biden has said publicly that he would defend Taiwan with U.S. troops. That's an enormously different statement that we've made versus what we've made in the past. He's just said this in recent weeks. He's also signaling to China that the price is going to be extremely high, and that they could lose Beijing over Taiwan. But that might be
What
the price
what
tag.
what American interest does Washington have for defending an island nation that really doesn't
I think
have a huge, economic impact in the grand scheme of things on the U.S. economy relative to China, their current largest world trading partner outside of the EU?
Yeah, this is a truly tricky problem, and I presume, I've been sounding like I'm smarter than the Biden guys,
Hmm.
Biden administration. I want to make sure people realize that I know that I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas that they may or may not be thought about. But um, the uh, the issue is not Taiwan so much as Japan and South Korea, Australia. Um, China is interested, or appears to be interested in dominating all these countries and keeping the U.S. Eventually out of the world economic order, not just taking over the South China Sea, but preventing us from trading with these countries and potentially militarily uh, endangering them. I think Japan doesn't have a nuclear weapon. It doesn't have. So if Taiwan is taken over by China, Japan might be the next target. And will we defend Japan if we haven't defended Taiwan? Uh, you know, this is tricky. So we have to set a line a line in the sand, whatever, a red line
Hmm.
that says, so that this doesn't go. This isn't Munich 1933, where Hitler gradually starts walking into different places, and we end up with World War II. I think that's where President Biden's coming from. Fortunately, he's old, because older people uh, have talked to people who were in World War II and have also said, he's also probably, knows as much about history as anybody on these subjects. I don't know how much he reads, but he sounds like um, he knows where President Trump went to Pearl Harbor, and from what I understand, had never heard of Pearl Harbor when he visited Pearl Harbor. Maybe this is just apocryphal
What do you mean he never heard of Pearl Harbor?
Trump, but I heard that story that he just doesn't know history. You need to know history to be running things.
Well, we'll circle back and check on that. But yeah, okay. Finally, do you agree with American political scientist Graham Allison's assertion or research that in the past, uh, conflicts between great powers or a rise in a great power challenging an existing great power has usually led to conflict, armed conflict, and so the assertion or the assumption is that if history repeats itself, a nation challenging American hegemony will inevitably fight with the U.S.
I think there's a lot to what Allison is saying there. The U.S. likes to be in charge. We've been in charge for the world for about 100 years, a century. And we don't always win our engagements, but we feel we like the idea of being the hegemon. And so we have to understand, that's why one of the reasons I've been working on this paper with actually Russian economists and Mexican economists and American economists it's a big project about the future of global economic power, because we need to understand that the inevitability of China overtaking us dramatically, and even India potentially, uh, and are becoming a second-rate world power, economic power by ourselves. So we have to accommodate that. We have to know it's coming and figure out how we can live with that without losing trade with China, uh, losing trade with Japan. It's very difficult. But if we think we're going to be dominating through time, then we start to sound like Putin, who's got this tiny economy, huge country, but tiny economy, and thinks he can take over all of Europe. And then we're back in like
Mhm.
1814 when he was in Moscow, when the Russians were in Moscow, they were in Paris and having defeated Napoleon. Yeah.
All right. Well, Laurence, you've given us lots to digest today. So a prospect of a war, but not likely. But in the meantime, guys, everyone watching, don't get psyched out. This recession may not be as bad as the newspapers are writing about. Thank you, Laurence. And of course, before we let you go, you mentioned your Substack. Where else can people find your work?
Well, so LarryKotlikoff.substack.com, and then Kotlikoff.net, and Maxify.com. Canadian, that's my financial planning company's personal financial planning software. It's really incredibly powerful to help people. All Canadians can use it just by going to settings and turning off the U.S. taxes and
Hmm.
and uh, Social Security benefits, and just entering those things in a different way in the program. Enter your after-tax earnings, for example,
Okay.
and you can.
And of course, you have your upcoming book, Author of Money, the Money of Magic.
Money came
Economists.
out in January, so it's already out there.
Oh, it's already out.
So
Yes.
it's a great read for people.
Yeah.
So take a
Your
look.
book, yeah, Money and Magic and Economist Secrets to More Money, Less Risk, and a Better Life. So thank you, Larry, and I will have you back on again soon to talk about ongoing developments in the economy. Thank you.
All right, David. My pleasure. A lot of fun.
And thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm David Lin.